Hello everyone and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host as always, and this week I'm joined, and it's a late shift for him tonight, so I very much appreciate him making the time, as we've got a topper of a show to talk about, is Grant Sneddon. Grant, thanks so much for coming on, my man.
Always a pleasure, Cammy. It's actually a triple shift for me today, but look, we don't moan about it too much on here. We just get on with the job and do what needs required. So, look, always pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
Such is the hard-working effort that is constantly put in by all of our podders here at Heart and Hand, both on our free shows and also across on Patreon. Yeah, Grant, one of the tough things that when you've got no midweek game, and it's great for Rangers because there is plenty of time for rest and recovery, getting players back into training. From a podcasting perspective, it's difficult because you've got very little to talk about. However, Rangers did me a massive favour by releasing the Patrick Stewart interview on Wednesday, which was going to give me some content to have a chat with you about. And then that story was then well and truly trumped by the announcement around about Wednesday tea time from Keith Jackson in the Daily Record, and then by a number of other news outlets, that Rangers are supposedly in talks with an American giant firm called the 49ers Enterprises. They are the investment arm of the San Francisco 49ers of American football, for anyone who doesn't know. So from a show where I thought I'm going to have very little to talk about, I've now got lots and lots to talk about. Let's get into that just now. So, as I say, Keith Jackson broke that story. I think it was just about 5:30, 6 o'clock on Wednesday late afternoon, early evening, and it has absolutely blown the Rangers' social media into the stratosphere. For anyone who doesn't know, the overall story or the overall picture, I should say, is that Rangers are potentially looking at a consortium which will include part of that investment arm, part of a consortium that's being headed by Parag Magarati, who is the Leeds United chairman, but was responsible for the investment get into Leeds, and with several other parties included within that. And it could be a massive, massive cash injection that comes in to Rangers. Grant, you've had some opportunity in amongst all the podding that you've been doing in the last few hours to be able to have a look through the story and digest some of it. Give me some of your initial thoughts, and then we'll start getting into some of the details and what's been said and maybe what's not been said.
I mean, the first thing is that when the news broke around 6 o'clock, Cammy, that you initially think, because of where it's coming from and who it's coming from, I think it's fair to say the entirety of the Rangers support are like, aye, okay, whatever, Keith. Thanks for the heads up. We kind of know it's not happening, sort of thing. And then I'm sure you, like me, my phone blew up. My phone was getting so many text messages from my friends from other circles going, what do you know? Have you heard anything about this? Is there any truth in this? And you try and find out as much as you can about it. It's certainly something that none of us can really say that we saw coming with it, because as much as we have been saying that we have needed fresh investment for quite a while now, that the investor group, as much as the good that they have done for the club, the money that they continue to invest into this day, that maybe that went a bit stale. It needs fresh ideas. It does need that fresh level of investment. And then this comes along and you start doing a bit of digging into it, and maybe there were things that were there that were actually noticeable in plain sight that we just kind of overlooked at the time. So, as you know, I had the privilege of being at the AGM as a shareholder and listening to Alistair Johnson speak during it. He made reference to a conversation that he had with Jim Ratcliffe and talking about the possibility of Rangers entering into some sort of multi-club partnership, which you see becoming quite prevalent within football nowadays. If you look at, for example, the City Group is obviously the big example with their clubs around the world. Chelsea have that sort of partnership now as well. If you look at them, Strasbourg, for example, and then the aforementioned Leeds United suddenly becoming part of that within the 49ers investment group as well. It then, what was it, week before, there was the name of the company who were doing the external review that kind of got into the mainstream.
Sportsology, yeah.
Yep. And then further digging into them, not only do they have a clientele list of Ineos, MLS teams, FC Cincinnati and Inter Miami, it's headed up by none other than the San Francisco 49ers as well. So has this been going on in the background for quite a while without obviously first-hand knowledge of the situation, which we don't have, but you kind of put two and two together and there's the possibility of coming up with four. You might come up with a completely different number, but it seems to make sense that sort of building block, those discussions have been taking place at some sort of back level between directors, between potential people who are going to sell their shares. I think what this brings, Cammy, is a much needed level of excitement to the support again, because the last time me and you were speaking, we were talking about the fact that the fans need something to be infused by between now and the end of the season, given where we are domestically, given the fact that really a deep run in the Europa League is all we really have to look forward to for the rest of the season. This just brings an excitement back to the full support, the full club. It breathes a bit of freshness into it. And what it also brings, and I think the longer this kind of goes on, the days, the weeks that this moves on, this will become clearer and clearer, is how exactly does this investment take shape? Is it a front-loaded level of cash? Is it more commercial revenue? Who is going to give up their shares? Who's going to sell their shares? It's all questions that are out there at the moment, and it brings much-needed discussion points to the club again.
Yeah, so a good bit there that I have kind of been able to put together as part of my research within this. So unpacking that, I can't do it sequentially, but unpacking some of that, I think from kind of top to bottom, you're absolutely right. Sportsology Group, as a global sports advisory firm, they do list the 49ers as one of their more high-profile clients. So there's quite clearly been some lines drawn in terms of that level of connection. As you rightly say, Alistair Johnson's been mentioned within that. John Halstead, who came into Rangers just over 18 months ago, has been involved in as again another part of that connection. The major thing, I think, Grant, at the moment, now Rangers have officially commented on it. And the comment was as much of a comment as it was just to say that it is our policy not to comment on speculation. If there were any such discussions, those would remain confidential. What I think has been more telling, because as you mentioned there, as soon as the Daily Record broke this story, no friend of Rangers, Keith Jackson, even less so, I expected various journalists with relatively close connections to Rangers to cause and effect, the guys who you know that you can more or less expect the truth from in one degree or another, to come out and shoot it down, and that didn't happen.
No.
And then I think that added fuel to that fire to say, well, is there something in this? And Rangers, as you rightly say, as far back as the AGM, John Gilligan spoke about this to say, investors do come and speak to us. There has been previous interest from America, Kayla Fox, I think her name was, and that seemed to kind of die a death pretty quickly. However, this seems to have ran. Now, as I say, we're recording late on Wednesday night. By the time that everyone gets a chance to listen to this, it'll be 6 o'clock Thursday afternoon. So the picture may very well have changed. However, at the moment, it seems that no one is willing to be able to shoot it down. Rangers, of course, cannot comment. I'm amazed that their release was as many as 2 lines rather than just simply the no comment. Because, of course, you can't do it. But you then start to pair in, there are investors who we know want to go. Obviously, Dave King has wanted to be able to try and do that, and he's exercised various methods within which to offload his shareholding. John Bennett may be looking to look at his investment. We obviously know that unfortunately he had to step down due to ill health earlier on this season. And there may be other investors who are ready to be able to kind of part company with shares. What I think is really interesting about all of this is an article which I actually found on the CNBC.com website. And I'll just read this out to you, Grant. It says, looks like they're, and this is in relation to the San Francisco 49ers. So it looks like they're selling 10% of the franchise, which if the projected value of $9 billion, and it's not going to be much less than that, maybe bottoming out at $7.4 billion, then they will raise anything between $740 to $900 million. The rules only changed last year to allow private equity investment of up to 10% of a franchise. The parent company of the 49ers, this is a direct quote, the parent company of the 49ers, 49ers Enterprises, also owns the English football club Leeds United. The York family own the 49ers, and Jed York is the 49ers CEO. Jed York is the son of his parents who bought the 49ers about 25 years ago. The quote continues, many teams are eager to sell minority stakes for increased liquidity for family members or for money that can be pumped back into the team for stadium repairs or for future investments. And it's probably that last couple of words there, Grant, that struck me as well. That would suggest to me that they are certainly freeing up capital. Now, before anyone starts popping champagne corks, I'm afraid that as much as we could sell some very decent barrels of snake oil, we're not selling Rangers for $740 million. Club's worth about £100 million, give or take. And so therefore it's very much within the ballpark. Again, I come back to what I said at the top of the show. It's not just necessarily coming from 49ers Enterprises. There's a consortium who are looking to be able to obviously continue to invest. But that's serious money, Grant. And at this point in time, I think what you're starting to see from various different social media posts, newspaper articles, I'm probably the same as you. We've had every WhatsApp forward message under the sun at this point. The rumour mill is definitely churning. But it's interesting. And what I think the other thing that can interest me within this as well is that this isn't just necessarily about injecting money into the club and being able to take it from there. What it's also about is the commercial aspect of it. Parag Marathi is very much stats driven. He's a Stanford graduate. He's very much of the analytical basis of the sporting model that can work as he sees fit. So I think that it's natural that a link could be drawn between the football review that's currently happening in the audit, whether that's not as now this new angle has appeared. This may be now, it's not necessarily about an audit to be able to get the club ship shape. It could be an investor looking to be able to kick our tyres and see as to how much we're worth.
I think that is exactly what this is going to prove to be, Cammy, in all honesty, because what you've just mentioned there and now in terms of that analytic model that Sportsology sort of apply to their clientele as well. You mentioned the 49ers and their specific data analysis. I'm a big fan of American football. I watch it every week. I follow a team in the league, and that has turned the San Francisco 49ers into one of the best franchises in that sport, and several Super Bowl appearances over the last couple of seasons. So their system works in terms of that investment into the team, building, recruiting, whatever it may be, and getting tangible results. If that then comes to us, perfect. But in terms of the actual opportunity itself, you talk about the commercial aspect of it. If you had asked anyone in the AGM in December if they could envisage this level of commercial opportunity coming to Rangers, it would have been something that would have been seen as viable, because we didn't have what appeared to be the nous to be able to actually market ourselves this way. That has suddenly all changed, and I think that actually goes to show how well people like John Gilligan, like perhaps you mentioned John Helsted, Alistair Johnson. You could even reach that to Fraser Fortin and Patrick Stewart, how well they've actually done in their role at the moment. And look, we're going to talk about Patrick Stewart and maybe some shortcomings potentially as well. But if this is where we're at, we need to caveat this with massively if, because at the moment it is still just paper talk. But the statement you mentioned from Rangers kind of gives, yeah, we know it's happening, but we can't really say anything about it because of legality reasons. Then, as I mentioned, and I go back to it, it's just such a positive direction because none of us seen this coming. And the fact that we're sat here talking about this is such a positive note.
Yeah, I agree. And I suppose I'm cautiously optimistic that it could come to fruition. The signs that I think we've mentioned already, that it would have been a non-starter, or it could have been a non-starter, don't seem to have come to fruition. I think that for me, the most important thing that we can focus on now is that if this is going to happen, then there will be shake-ups at boardroom level if those investors that we've mentioned are looking to be able to offload. They have the financial clout to be able to make it happen. And again, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned there obviously the commercial revenue. Of course, that's absolutely huge. And Rangers, by and large, can be a commercial brand that can be sold. And when I say can be sold, I mean it's a global institution. You only have to see even the privilege that you and I have here in Heart and Hand, that we have people across the planet listen to this and make it part of their regular routine every single day. That's how much this club means to them. It's, as far as I'm concerned, that there isn't another club in the world that has that level of pull. You then start to look at the practical side of it. So, like I say, things within the European campaign, been involved within a European stage since pretty consistently since 2018, with some real high points along the way, does suggest that from an outsider looking in, this could be something that if you were to give it an injection, if you were to give it a shot in the arm, is capable of moving to the next level. But this is why I think, to a lot of people, myself included, by the way, the internal audit makes absolute sense. Because fundamentally, if you're willing to look at that, you need to know that firstly it's fit for purpose. And if it's not fit for purpose, how likely and how much is it going to spend for you to get it into shape, in order for you to be able to do that? So I'm not saying everything lives or dies by the audit, because I don't think that things have ran so badly that money and time couldn't fix those problems, because they were always going to be discussed, whether it was an outside investor injection or not. But I think what's interesting, as I say, more than anything else for me, is being able to give us that I'd agree that feel good factor, because we might all just be running away with ourselves here. Okay, we could be, you and I could be sitting talking in a week and going, "Oh, that's all dead in the water. Nothing's happened." But right now, if I'm being perfectly honest and perfectly selfish, anything that I can take that would be a good news story around Rangers in the current climate, I'll absolutely take, and I make no apology for that.
No, I absolutely agree, Cammy, and never should anyone else who is thinking big about this, because, as I mentioned earlier on the show, because of where we are domestically at the moment, the sort of apathy that surrounds the club at the moment, the malaise within the support, as well as the general managerial situation, we need something to be excited about. We need something to talk about. This has brought us, and where we are at the moment, yes, there is potential stumbling blocks that could mean that what we're talking about now is rendered irrelevant in a couple of weeks' time. But where we're at the moment, the signs are certainly positive that this is even a discussion point to begin with, because all we've heard from detractors of the club is that no one will want to invest. It's hemorrhaging money. It's not marketable. It's not this. It's not that. I think that kind of dispels that entirely.
I think it does, and sorry to interrupt, because I think you
No,
bring up a great point there as well, Grant. Was I think what we've had to do in recent history in order to be able to get us back into a solid place is that we've almost had to look at individual investors, and we've had to ask them to be able to pump money in to get shares in return, and we've had to go back to them to be able to get more money from them later on down the road, as we obviously have tried to correct everything that was the aftermath of 2012. And the reason as to why I think this feels a little bit different is this isn't an individual. This is a consortium. And a consortium won't take the level of personal criticism, I think, in the same way that an individual would, because at Rangers, you're effectively assessed by how much money you're putting in. If you're seen to take money out of it, you could become the boogeyman. And if we don't win trophies as a result of things which are not immediately in your direct control, we then come back with the handout to say, well, we need more money to be able to invest. But the reason why we need more money and we need more investment is because we've hemorrhaged cash at various levels throughout the club. In some cases, not as much. In other cases, especially from player transfers, absolute shitload. It's why it's the myth against this idea that you've got people who are multi-millionaires waiting in the wings to be able to try and come in. Those guys, they don't come in to inject cash just because it's for the good of the club. They want something out the back of it. A consortium can come in with the kind of heavyweight finance that means that they don't take it on the chin if things don't go well immediately, but they can also come in with enough clout to be able to get some of those quick wins that, if I'm speaking bluntly, probably need more cash than time.
yeah, no, 100% agree, because you talk about wastage, and again, going back to the AGM, if you look at the amount of money that we have as a turnover to what we make as a loss, it's criminal, Cammy, in all honesty. We should not have the sort of revenue that we have coming into the club through European money, TV money from that, commercial aspects, hospitality, ticketing sales, season tickets, like whatever the fans are asked for, they time and time again step up to that plate in order to provide that level of investment, because look, it's obviously not to the same degree, but that's exactly what it is. Fans are investing their money into the club in order to secure their seat and to help success within the park. We have mismanaged that so badly in the last 4 years, I would say. Now you could probably make an argument for longer, but we all knew that the beginning of Steven Gerrard's reign in 2018 needed that front loading of investment. So probably since about 2021 onwards, you can really say that there's been a mismanagement of Rangers' finances, especially on a playing side. The level of wages. Look at the players we got rid of in the summer, in January, the amount of wages that they were on, and the level of player that they are and what they brought to our playing squad. It is criminal. Just before we move on, though, Cammy, what I would like to sort of add to the investment chat is it will be interesting to see what happens, because the way that our shareholding is, as you well know, and quite a lot of the listeners will know as well, is that it's not David Murray level of one person controls X amount of shares and a handful of shares are scattered around other investors and like fans groups or individuals. I think our top shareholding at the moment is something like 15%, maybe around that level in terms of individual holdings. So how does that make up? Do we get rid of do John Bennett cash in their shares? Is it the Parks? Is it going to be Club 1872? Is it going to be a mixture of the smaller shareholders of like George Letham, John Helsted, Alistair Johnston, for example? But the other question that comes into that as well, because of the fan investment through Tifosi as well, what happens with that? It's all questions that are just swirling around at the moment, giving us discussion points again, but questions that if this is going to go where we want it to go, the answers need answer for that, in all honesty.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. Well, listen, we will wait and see what happens. And I normally do the plug for our Patreon site at the end of the show, but I'm going to do it now because if anything does develop, we will bring you it as quickly as we possibly can as breaking news across on patreon.com/heart and hand. And you'll also be able to get our daily update on there every day, Monday to Friday, with any other new stories or new takes or anything that comes out that's fresh with relation to a potential takeover as well. Grant, let's bring it back to a little bit closer to home. And as I mentioned earlier on Wednesday afternoon, Patrick Stewart had an interview on Rangers TV where he was asked, I'm going to be honest, some fairly hard-hitting questions such as why is Philippe Clement been allowed to survive after what Patrick Stewart himself described as an unacceptable result against Queen's Park and exiting the Scottish Cup. I'm going to talk a little bit more in just a second about some of the detail that was covered within that. I know that you've had a chance to have a look at it. I'm going to go to bat a little bit for Patrick Stewart. Now, I spoke to Andy McGowan last week. Andy McGowan, well-known board bootlicker. But he did make the very, very, very accurate point that Patrick Stewart has only been in role now for just over 2 months. And I feel that there's a percentage of the support that's not yet fully behind him because he hasn't sacked Philippe Clement. Now, we've discussed to death the fact that, the manager is on borrowed time. It's going to be a question of when and not if. I'll be honest with you, Andy and I discussed it last week. I think being able to deliver the fans ahead on a plate might have got a short-term win, but there has to be a greater degree of strategy to what we are looking to be able to do. Our hope, yours, mine, everybody listening to this, is that strategy is to plan a future without Philippe Clement as manager, and how that is going to look and feel, the timing of it, etc. You mentioned earlier on, obviously, Patrick Stewart and Fraser Thornton. I believe that if there is a takeover, the rumours are that those two will remain in role, which I think is absolutely fair given the level of their tenure to date. But just keen to get your thoughts and the takeaways from the Patrick Stewart interview. Were you pleased to see it? Was it good enough for you? Didn't mention enough? Where were you at after you watched it?
I want to echo, first of all, the sentiments that you made. I was very surprised at the level of question that got asked of Patrick Stewart because, look, if we're all being honest, typically these interviews are sort of soft-fieldy questions in order to give the people doing the interviews a win as such in terms of getting the point across, not really being challenged too vociferously on their views, and away they go. Job's done. But fair play. It was some questions that we've not been accustomed to in the past at that level. So, first of all, I think it was very welcome because we've all kind of said, and like other podders have discussed over on our Patreon site over the past week about their thoughts and feelings about the silence that sort of came from Ibrox over the last week after the Queen's Park debacle, and everybody kind of expecting a message. What that message was going to be would have been interesting to see, but it's came out, so fair enough. I think, honestly, the point of criticism comes in the fact that it's a week too late. In my opinion, I think if you take the exact interview that Patrick Stewart has done on Wednesday and then put it back 1 week, then everyone goes, okay, fair enough. It's not what I want to hear, but at least you've come out, you've fronted the fan feeling, you've fronted against the potential criticism, because let's be honest, there was no upside to doing an interview like that without the overwhelming message which the fans want to hear is the sacking of Luke Clement, as you mentioned. If that wasn't going to be mentioned, then...
Yeah, but at the same point, though, Grant, and this is where I think the timing has probably been pretty strategic, because I do understand your sentiment, because I know that people were calling for it. But if you do revise the timing of that interview, so let's say he does come out with it Monday, Tuesday after Queen's Park, the message doesn't change, but then we go to Tynecastle and lose, which, by the way, was entirely feasible given the fact that, we did not play great for periods of that game, and Hearts were pretty atrocious in front of goal. But then does that not amplify the message to come back to say, right, well, you told us a few days ago that the results have to improve and the manager has Europe, but now he's lost another domestic away game?
I suppose that is true, but it borders on revisionism a bit for me, because let's be honest, it was not really a good time to do an interview like this. It's not as though we're on the crest of a wave. We're not performing well domestically. We're not winners of a cup final. We're not progressing into the latter stages of our other domestic cup. We're not near the top of the league. Things aren't going well. There isn't a good time to do an interview like this, if we're going to be honest. So I can see both positive and negatives either way from it, in all honesty. But I think, and I've said this on other shows on our Patreon network as well, Cammy, that I did have a line of thinking that the manager was going to be given the European campaign. I've said internally, I've had internal thoughts throughout the full season that we are sort of echoing the 2005-2006 season under Alex McLeish, where we finished third in the league, got to the last 16 of the Champions League, only to be knocked out by Villarreal. Obviously not going to finish third in the league, well, hopefully not, at least. But the manager, in my view, was going to get the grace of leading us into Europe, considering the fact he led us to it. His plan, his tactics have allowed us to finish in the top 8 of the Europa League, which at the beginning of the campaign was pretty unimaginable. So the line of thinking clearly, and has now been communicated by Patrick Stewart, is that he deserves that opportunity. Okay, it's a fair enough line of thinking. It's not going to be anywhere near universally liked, but at least people understand the line of thinking to a degree. It's just the flip side of that is people will look between the lines of that and come to the conclusion of, well, based on what you're saying there, we are expecting that if or when we go out of Europe, this is when this is going to come to an end. Now, they might be right on that, they might be entirely wrong on that, but it leaves perhaps a shred of doubt into, is that what he means by what he said there now? But overall, I think it has... I don't want to say it's bottom time, Cammy, because what you and Andy said last week is entirely right. He's been in the job far too little time to be judged on anywhere near a practical level without letting emotions dictate your view on what Patrick Stewart is doing at the moment. But it's kind of just brought that little bit of, okay, he does get it. He's come out, he has fronted the situation. And then whether the second announcement of the investment came today or whether it didn't, there was a bit of buy-in from the club again, not the club, the fans again, sorry, and saying, right, okay, you've come out, you've said this, let's see what happens over the next couple of weeks. I think that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's a fair summary. I'll go through probably the big takeaway for me, Grant, which was mentioning the ongoing review, which we've obviously kind of touched on, but the requirement now to be able to make an appointment as a sporting director. So the most significant action which has arisen from the ongoing review is that we've identified the need to appoint someone who has responsibility for the entire football operations throughout the club. We are now in the market for a sporting director. That role will put someone right at the top of the football tree, an experienced football person who will be responsible for all aspects of the football club to ensure they're working together towards fulfilling our holistic joined-up plan. If you look at each of the elite European football clubs, most of them have a single person that is responsible for the entirety of the football operations. We are something of an outlier by not having that at the moment, so that's why we're going to that model. Talking about Niles Coppin, he said Niles was brought in to do player recruitment, and when there were some senior departures in the football area, he stepped up and brought some stability and leadership. I'm really grateful for him for doing grateful to him for doing that. Niles has performed really strongly in player recruitment, and we can see the results of that with the players that we have at the moment. He is someone who I rate really highly, but the sporting director will complement his role as it will allow him to focus on what he was hired to do, which was to recruit players and in a wider context, squad planning. This will give some breathing space to do that, and it will really complement and give him the ability to do that. He said, I'm not going to put a set timeline on the sporting director recruitment because this is about getting the right person that's going to be the best solution for Rangers in the long term. It means that we will, if necessary, wait to get the best candidate and not just jump on one that becomes available at the earliest opportunity. That said, it's really important we continue with the process while we're waiting for the right candidate to start. We're going to make sure that the sporting director recruitment process dovetails with the review so that we don't need to undo anything that we're currently putting in place at the moment, and progress can continue to be made. I expect external support on the football review to taper down as the season tapers down, but as the football review will not ever end, this is about constant evolution. We started this review to kickstart that process, but again, if we're going to compete, then we need to, like any elite football club, be constantly improving. The sporting director will come in and continue to drive that improvement. And over the next few months, there will be further actions that are implemented, with some of those we will share with the supporters over the coming weeks and months as they emerge. Listen, it's welcome news. I do understand that there's maybe been some bloodlines in terms of the Niles Coppin move, from head of player recruitment into technical director. I fundamentally believe a sporting director has to be able to come in. What's been interesting to me has been the response to that part when you then align it to the manager. Is people read that as, well, we're going to have to bring a sporting director in order to be able to sack the manager. I don't believe that those two things need to be connected. I think that, as you rightly say, if the manager's future is now pretty much based on European success, and shy of winning the Europa League, like I say, I don't think many fans are going to turn their opinion back round again and Philippe Clement. The sporting director has to be able to come in to stabilise the overall football operations, be the figure point of it. It needs to be able to be someone that has experience within that role. And what we need to really avoid, Grant, for me, is, and maybe, I would be delighted if the football review comes out the back of this to say you can't have roles overlapping into other roles, because we've done that too much before, and it's led us down this horrendous financial quagmire of people not qualified making decisions in roles that they were not originally brought in for, and because there is a gap, or because they've maybe put their hand up incorrectly and said, oh, I can do that, then it's led to this mismanagement. So the sporting director has to be responsible for all of that, working alongside COP and in various aspects of recruitment and the player trading model being executed. The most important thing for me, though, is that you have to be able to allow that process its due diligence. So therefore, I'm not suggesting that Rangers get someone in tomorrow and that's all going to make us feel better. It's going to take time. And that's a good thing, as much as I know, and I'm certainly one of the worst for it for being impatient, but it has to be the right person who can deliver what we are expecting them to deliver, not bring them in the door and go, oh, by the way, the parameters have shifted and now the role is different to what you thought you were coming into.
No, wait, that's entirely fair. We have, in some form or another, Cammy, effectively ran a sporting director of football model since Mark Allen back in 2016 when he came in, all the way through to Ross Wilson leaving in 2022. And the one thing, as you quite rightly mentioned, that they all have in common is that they had too big a role within the club, as in they were asked to oversee transfers, player contract negotiations, medical stuff, academy overview, academy overhauls, playing squad overhauls, transfer dealings, and it just became too much for them to do. Now, I'm in no way saying that getting rid of Ross Wilson was the wrong thing to do, because it wasn't. He had come to the end of his usefulness to the club in terms of what he could provide in terms of ideas and delivery, and it needed someone fresh in the role. But what we did instead of doing that due diligence that you refer to and then going, right, who can we get in that can take this on and do it to a level above what we've had the last couple of years? We just went, do we really need the role? Nah, James Bisgrove can do it as CEO. Okay, we'll get rid of it. Cool. It's so wrong, because I don't understand how a club, or any business for that matter, can operate in one direction for the best part of 6 to 8 years in one way, and then suddenly decide, because one person isn't what they wanted them to be in that role, right, we'll just scrap the thing entirely. It is bad, because what has then happened is James Bisgrove had too much on his plate as a new CEO. He then had to be dealing with all the stuff that a sporting director would have to do. If you look at Niels Coppin, he's probably in exactly the same role as technical director at the moment. He's got his actual job remit, but then he's got other things that he needs to contend with as well. So you are right, there does need to be that role separation of, right, you're responsible for X, Y, and Z. Niels, you are responsible for your X, Y, and Z. One or two things might overlap each other and overarch, but that's fine, because it then allows for a difference of opinion, collaborative work, and then coming to a consensus of the right idea. But ultimately, it allows people to specialise or focus their attention on a handful of things, do it well, and then overall the club is in a much better position, rather than people who have had historically their eyes all over the place, and it just ends up in letting things slide. So, like, for example, how many times can we have lamented the fact that sellable assets have not moved on for the proper value because their contracts are coming to an end, or we've got 5 or 6 players all at the one time coming to the end of their contracts? Is that because someone had too overarching a role that's the thing that got let misled by them when their eyes were elsewhere trying to fix a problem, perhaps within the medical department or the academy setup. It then just gives clarity for the people within the roles, and ultimately that's better for the football club.
Yep, very true. So I think what's really important is as well that Patrick Stewart has now put all of this on record. I'm not giving him brownie points for that. I just mean that what he's done is he's made this now a point of order that if we don't move on it with as much deliberate speed as we can, then it's going to come back to him, because people will remember these things and people will recall it to remind them that we need to make sure that we get these appointments brought in, and why they are so important to us as well in the longer run. Grant, let's finish up as we are back to a lovely Saturday 3 p.m. kickoff against St Mirren at Ibrox Saturday afternoon. We are back to midweek action across the course of next week. We're away to Killie next week, and then we are back at home to Motherwell. So we're not going to have that respite any longer of that lovely few days off between games. St Mirren on Saturday, I think, is a good opportunity, firstly, for us to be able to take revenge for Boxing Day. And if we needed a lesson to say that you can't be lackadaisical towards your approach to the game, then again, I'll take you back to Queen's Park. I'll be interested to see what the mood around Ibrox will be like, because I already know there'll be a number of people who aren't planning on attending, that they've fallen away from it for one reason or another because of recent results and lack of action by the club regarding the manager and various other things. However, if we're going to ride this crest of a wave of optimism regarding potential cash injection, and it might be interesting to see if that does have an impact on attendance. By and large, however, Rangers need to go and make as straightforward a job of it as we can, because I do believe that it will be very, very toxic if St Mirren are able to lay a glove on us and we can't take care of business. So, albeit the fact that I don't think it will do much in terms of really making a real difference in terms of where we are within our league campaign, I think you're right. Second is pretty much solidified. Right now, what it's about is Rangers players stepping up their performances, because I didn't think it was great at Tynecastle and I thought it was absolutely atrocious against Queen's Park. And the manager looking to be able to make sure that he plays the correct team and not play players who, by and large, just now have pretty much let him down with a series of substandard performances. Are you looking forward to it? You'll obviously be heading along. Keen to get your gauge on your overall level of enthusiasm for getting along to Ibrox.
I think my thoughts on it is, because of where the European games are coming, they're only 2 weeks away. We do need to see a much better team and individual level of performance. You're 100% spot on in terms of what the expectations were at Tynecastle. We were maybe expecting to see a much higher uplift in performance. The team and the individual players looking to not right the wrongs of the Queen's Park game, because nothing that they could have done would have done that, but show that they had a bit of professional pride within them, that they understood the significance of the result, how seismic it is for a club like us to have a result like that at home to a lower division side in the cup. And it just didn't come. Result came, which, look, it's no mean feat going to Gorgie and getting a result, especially like that. But the performance wasn't what I was expecting. So I'm looking forward to going on Saturday. I do always enjoy the opportunity to meet up with yourself, the guys from the pod, and just generally getting along to Ibrox. I always do enjoy the opportunity, but I think where I'm in terms of the level of the performances, I just want to see players actually step it up, because they've got their place within the European starting 11 to fight for, hopefully fight for. But again, that professional pride, because all we can do as a club at the moment, Cammy, is just win games. Just continue to win games and put levels of performances in that, quite frankly, these players are expected to put in, which has been missing for far too much of this season, both on an individual and team level. We've discussed it to death across different podcasts, which individual players are not putting in the performances and everything like that. So I would like to see that return. I do think that we missed too many opportunities to put teams to the sword, especially at home. How many times have you maybe seen a quick goal at Ibrox and you're thinking, right, this could potentially go and be 4 or 5 today, and it ends up being 1 or 2 because we take our foot off the gas. I don't want to see that on Saturday. I do want to see players playing with a bit of enthusiasm. They have had the break, but you've mentioned midweek game, but they're now coming back into that games coming thick and fast routine, really between now and Parkhead on the 16th of March. I don't think we don't have a game every 3 days between that run, so it's a chance to build up a bit of momentum going into what is ultimately some difficult away performances. Obviously, the enormity of the European ties and what they have on their season outlook coming up as well. So, yeah, just want to see a bit of cohesion within the team. Hopefully a good performance, but overall, a positive result, because you are right. Anything less than Rangers starting well and winning, you could see not quite the level of the Hamilton 2020 vitriol that was in the crowd. I'm sure everyone remembers what game I'm referring to, just before the lockdown of that season. But something maybe not too far off that level if we don't match those standards that I'm talking about.
Yeah, very true, very true. It's over to the team and the manager to make sure that that doesn't happen. So that is the challenge set before them. That'll do us for this week's Extra. David will be back with you on Monday on Flagship to unpack the game against St Mirren, and as I say, hopefully talking about a solid performance and a solid win as well. I'll be back with you next Thursday after Wednesday's game against Kilmarnock at Rugby Park as well, to unpack that, and look forward to the visit of Motherwell as we get back to Ibrox again for the second time in a week. That would be lovely. All that's left for me to do is to thank you all for listening, thank our producers, Mike Lee and Paul Myers, and to thank Mr. Grant Sneddon. Grant, recording 3 shows for the podcast back to back and waiting up until the early hours to be able to record this with me. What an absolute superstar you are.
As I said right at the top, Cammy, we don't lament that. We don't put in excuses or look for credit for it. It's just what we do. But look, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, my friend. So thanks very much.
Thanks, folks, and we'll be back with you on Monday. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.